We experience more trauma at an earlier age, more sexual trauma. We're 14 times more likely to be raped than men. And then the third is a little more selfish. Just finding that in my own experience, even as a physician, as I've struggled through different stages of life.
I am so excited for today's episode. It was really special because I got to spend the entire day in the home of Dr. Sara Gottfried Szal, who's the author of The Autoimmune Cure and also Women, Food, and Hormones, and many others. She is a groundbreaking women's health doctor who really understands the connection between our traumas, our emotions, and our physical health. The part right at the beginning of the show made me emotional because I asked her why she cares so deeply about healing women's bodies, and her answer really surprised me and was actually incredibly personal to me. So you'll have to listen in to find out what that was. We talked so much about hormones, vitality, fertility, both literally and metaphorically. We talked about boundaries, overfunctioning, how to let go of that, how to have better sex, more orgasms, how to live a juicier life on so many levels. So this episode is a really special one. It was really meaningful for me personally, from a legacy perspective around women's health. And I know you are going to love Dr. Sara Gottfried Szal. Welcome to Plenty. I'm your host, Kate Northrup, and together we are going on a journey to help you have an incredible relationship with money, time, and energy, and to have abundance on every possible level. Every week, we're going to dive in with experts and insights to help you unlock a life of plenty. Let's go fill our cups.
Please note that the opinions and perspectives of the guests on the Plenty podcast are not necessarily reflective of the opinions and perspectives of Kate Northrup or anyone who works within the Kate Northrup brand.
Thank you for being here, Sarah. Well, at your house. On my podcast.
I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, so
here
good. Thank you. Thank you for your work. I'm so excited to dive in. So my first question is, what is it about women's health for you that makes you inspired to keep going deeper and deeper and serving on the level you serve? Why do you do this?
3 things. The first is your mom. I have to say, I was in college in the 80s, and she had a PBS special where she was talking about women and women's health and the objectification of women, kind of the ultimate objectification when they're on an operating table and can't even speak for themselves. And I felt like she had a way of talking about women and women's health that deeply inspired me, got me to go to medical school.
Wow.
So that was number 1. Number 2 is just the health hazard that it is to be female in our culture right now. And some of those are sex differences, things that are biological, but a lot of them are socially constructed. The way that we have more emotional labor, we have more stress, we experience more trauma at an earlier age, more sexual trauma. We're 14 times more likely to be raped than men. And then the third is a little more selfish. Just finding that in my own experience, even as a physician, as I've struggled through different stages of life, that I was dismissed by our healthcare system. Even with all the effort that we've put in over the past 30 plus years that I've been practicing, in some ways we're worse off. And so that's what gets me to jump out of bed in the morning. It's got that, that feeling of if I'm being dismissed, if I'm being gaslit, and I'm a physician, then there are millions of women that are still being dismissed and gaslit.
It's insane. As a non-physician, but as someone who was raised by 2 of them, the very few experiences I've had in the traditional medical system, both of my births, and since my husband has had a variety of accidents and injuries. And I go in there and I am such a pain in the ass. And like with the births, I was, coming in an ambulance with my first birth, telling them no to everything. No, I wouldn't let them put an IV in me. No, I wouldn't, whatever, all of that while I'm 10 centimeters, like pushing, the whole thing. And I'm like, if I am having this much trouble advocating for myself with the depth of knowledge and the courage that I have and the galvanization that I have, women are fucked.
Yes.
Like, how is this possible? And so when you say in certain ways it's gotten worse, can you tell me more about that, what you're seeing?
Well, there's so many ways that it's worse. I mean, we've known about women being dismissed and gaslit for a long time. And I even remember going to the doctor with my grandmother. And sometimes my grandfather would come along, and I remember the physician speaking directly to my grandfather. We think she should take this medication. We think that she should stop doing this. She's got a heart condition, and so here's what we're going to do.
Right.
As if she wasn't even there.
Talking to her about her in the third person.
That's right. So I witnessed that growing up. And now I look at things like women over 40 going through perimenopause and menopause. What I see is that the knowledge gap has actually gotten worse. The research gap, we hope, is starting to close, but the truth is it is incredibly slow. Most of the funding still goes to Men's Health, or it funds research that includes men, and the data are assumed to apply to women until proven otherwise.
Which we really have no idea.
We have no idea. True. And what I see now is that women going through perimenopause and menopause, 73 to 75% of them don't get the care, don't get the treatment that they need.
Yeah.
So that has worsened. And then I would say more related to cultural changes, like what's happened with our food supply, what's happened with toxic exposures that women get more of because we use more skincare and more makeup. Women now have a rate of autoimmunity that has skyrocketed. So I wrote about that in my latest book, but I think that's one of those areas that's worsened. And some of it is biological. So some of it is related to having an X chromosome. We tend to react more to vaccines and to infections. We go through things that men don't go through, like pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause, menopause. But then there's also these sociocultural differences that we can do something about.
Yeah.
And that includes, the greater emotional labor, more caregiving, there's a way that we're expected to be all things. And we often overfunction, overwork, overcare at the cost of our own health.
Yeah. So what do you think for women? A lot of women in our community are around my age. It's just like kind of the way it goes, right? And we have, 35 to 55 is kind of like the range, but many of our folks have just sort of like come along and grown up with me. And so I'm wondering, my girlfriends and I are talking a lot about perimenopause, a lot about all sorts of things. So I have a bunch of questions for you. And so that, hopefully at least whoever's listening to this can help close that gap of that 73 to 79% or whatever you said of not getting the care that they need.
Right.
First question is this. What can we be doing during our reproductive years preventatively to really set us up for the best experience possible in the transition from perimenopause to menopause?
I love this question because I've got two younger sisters, and they asked me that question as I was going through my training. And I really appreciate it because when you're in your reproductive years, there's a way that or at least I did, I thought about menopause as being this cliff I was going to fall off of, like after 50. So I didn't even think about it.
Right.
Like it just wasn't even a consideration. But it's during your reproductive years that you want to be tracking stress, and not just a subjective feeling about it, but measure that cortisol. Get a sense of the balance between your sympathetic nervous system, the on button, and your parasympathetic nervous system, the, rest and digest, feed and breed part of your nervous system. So heart rate variability is a great way to measure that.
Yeah.
Looks like you've got a ring on where you're measuring it.
And I want to ask you about HRV because mine has tanked in the last year, which is weird because I actually feel so not basically like before July of this past summer, I was sick nearly every single month for a year and a half. And I've done a lot of work on that. And I am proud to say I have not been sick since July.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I feel amazing. I feel like the best ever. And yet my HRV is still lower than it was the entire year previous. And I'm like, is it having an aftershock? And I was talking to my girlfriend about it last night. And she was like, I was like, what do you do about that? And I'm like, why is that? And she's like, it's your stress. And I'm like, no, and my friends wouldn't say, if they were talking about me, they wouldn't be like, oh, Kate is such a stress bucket by any means. I'm so happy. I love my life and whatever. So I'm like, what do I do? So what do I do?
There's a lot to do. So this is where I get excited, Kate, because when I work with patients, when I work with clients, like these are the kind of experiments that we do.
Yeah.
Where I'll take someone, as you described, with a lowish heart rate variability, or maybe you've got a baseline from before July that was better, and now you see that there's a trend going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that can affect heart rate variability. So that, those two halves of the autonomic nervous system, I think of the sympathetic nervous system as fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and then stay and play is the parasympathetic.
I love the stay and play one.
I like it too.
Fun. But I also heard you just say feed and breed, and I don't know that I've heard that before, so I like that one too.
We like all of them. And what we want, it's not that you want to stay in one or the other, but the healing happens in the parasympathetic. And so you want this fluid balance between the two. And ideally, kind of a 50-50 split between the two. And with wearables like an Aura, you can actually track that.
Yeah.
The number one most powerful thing I've seen with heart rate variability is alcohol.
Oh, I don't drink. But for other people,
so for
this
you,
is good.
So for you, this is
But I just
less
want
of an
folks to
issue.
listen up. She just said the number one thing she sees is alcohol. And I think that's a really important thing to mention because we don't need to get into it today. But like, obviously, it is so embedded in our culture as just like, okay. And for so many reasons, it's not great for our health. It's not great for our emotional lives. It's not great for really many things. And now you are telling me it is not great for our nervous system, which makes perfect sense. So even though that's not my thing, I'm glad you said it.
It's especially bad for women. There are, hormonal factors, other issues that make women be more vulnerable toward alcohol.
Yeah.
And then what we see from the data is that 1 or 2 servings of alcohol can affect your sleep for 7 to 8 nights. And so the way that it impacts your heart rate variability.
So if you're drinking even every week, you're never sleeping
That's
well.
right. So a lot of people, they'll just drink on the weekend. So it's got
important.
this really important global effect. What I like to do is to notice, when is your heart rate variability improved? So for instance, when I go to Costa Rica, my heart rate variability doubles to triples.
That sounds so nice.
It's really lovely.
I can
so we
feel
may
it
need
in
to
my
try
body right now.
We may need to try the experiment.
Okay, great.
too.
Maybe the Costa Rica experiment.
Yeah. So I've got a retreat there in July.
Okay.
I think there's something just so alive about the land, and 3% of the biodiversity in the world is there. So I always like to notice these geographic changes. So when I go to high altitude, Mexico City, Denver, my HRV is horrendous.
Plummets. Yeah,
horrendous.
that makes sense.
So we want to be watching those kind of things. I find, for instance, when I microdose on mushrooms, that my heart rate variability is greatly improved.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's cool. Okay, noting that. Thank you. Putting it on the list.
It's an immune modulator.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of that, but not in any sort of organized fashion. And so that's good. That's good to know.
Yeah. So
What did you just say? It's
It's an immunomodulator.
It's an immunomodulator. Okay.
So it can modulate the matrix of your body, not just creativity, not just
I know that we're going to come
inspiration.
back to your list because I really want it. But why do you think that is about mushrooms just from like on a spiritual, energetic level?
Oh my gosh. Love that question. There's a more science-based answer, which I can get to, but in some ways that's less compelling to me than the personal experiences that I see people have with mushrooms. So mushrooms, psilocybin in particular, it's one of those sacred medicines that I think my experience of it is that it comes into my system and it cleans. And it helps open my channel so that I really feel energy flowing through my system. And I know that sounds a little Northern California, but
I mean, that's right on point for this show.
It connects you to oneness.
Yeah.
It connects you to this mycelial network so that you don't feel as alone and isolated and like you're pushing the rock up the hill. It connects you to higher purpose, to a mystical state.
Yeah.
And the idea with microdosing, different than macrodosing, is that you're taking just a small amount, enough to connect to that web.
Right.
And I really feel that.
Yeah, right. So it's almost homeopathic in a way of like, okay, there's an energetic signature. I mean, of course, I don't know that this is scientific, but there's an energetic signature that you're taking that then is shifting the matrix of your body that then is making that connection while you're still able to operate heavy machinery and, go on Zoom calls and whatnot. Okay, great. Thank you. So microdosing. So coming back, you were listing out about HRV. Is there anything else that you might say would be helpful for folks who are really experiencing those lower rates than they would like to see with their HRV?
Look at your relationships. So I've tracked my HRV for about 15 years. And I can tell you, when I was still married and my marriage was falling apart, my heart rate variability was so much lower.
That makes so much sense. Yeah. And how wild that we can track those things now, right? Like, in previous decades, of course, people could feel that on some level, but to just be able to have the data.
To have the data, and even one step further, there's a psychotherapist that I really enjoy, Stan Tatkin, and he talks about the psychobiology of relationship. I've had this experience with a couple of friends who were on the cusp of divorce and trying to figure out if they should stay. And they've met with him, and he observes the psychobiology of the connection. And he can see things like the stress response, the lack of repair that happens when you're talking about something conflictual. I don't think he's tracking blood sugar, but I am.
Yeah.
And so low heart rate variability, more difficulty with sleep, not feeling fully recovered when I would sleep at night. And you can measure all of these things. And my physiology was different. Blood pressure was higher, resting pulse rate was higher. My blood sugar was about 10 points higher. So I would say assessing your relationships is important. Sounds like you're very happily married. So I don't know
very
if that's
happily
a factor.
married for sure. And there's something about also mothering young children.
Yes.
I mean, my kids are freaking incredible and they're 6 and 9. So at this point, they're much easier than they were, but it's a lot. And
It's
then
so
also
much.
right now, I live in a place that is like very intense.
Yeah.
And when you were talking about geographically, like there's just a lot of energy in my neighborhood. It's like really urban and I just don't like it anymore. So that may be a factor. Thank you for helping me identify that. Okay. So women,
Well, I think it's also an age issue. So you were asking about reproductive years.
yes.
And there was this really interesting study that was performed by Arthur Stone. And they call it the U-Bend. It was published in The Economist. What he did was he did a survey of Americans in the United States. And he asked questions related to psychological well-being. And what he found is that among adults, psychological well-being is really high in your 20s. And then it starts to dip in your 30s and your 40s. And then it starts to come up again before you turn 50.
Interesting.
So that's called the U-bend. And when I read about this study, I just was like, thank God someone understands what I'm going through. Like, I'm in the U-bend. I'm in the nadir.
Wow. And what do you chalk that up to? What's going on in our 30s and 40s that would account for lower rates of psychological well-being? I mean, I have plenty of ideas, but I want to know what you think.
Well, maybe we could riff together. Yeah. I think, they did look at parenting to see if parenting was the cause. I think there are unique challenges that you experience with parenting, but it's not just parents.
No, because some people aren't parents, I'm sure, who are in this study.
Right. So I think a lot of it is, identity and trying to understand your gifts and how to share your gifts with the world. I think there's the experience of caretaking, so not just kids, but maybe your parents.
And then those are also such big earning years, right?
They're big earning years. There's a lot of pressure.
Career, like this is the time, make hay while the sun shines. Like, in your 20s, it's sort of like anything's possible. And then, it's like 30 and 40 are those years to really go career-wise, at least, in our societal conglomerate. And then the 50s, would be more, for some people, of course, not for everyone, but a little bit more of a coasting.
For sure.
Right? Or beginning to be more in your coasting years.
Yeah. I mean, you think about just dating.
Or your harvest years, I should say.
Yeah. How old were you when you got married?
31.
Yeah. So I was.
And I had my first baby at 30. I don't know, 32, 33.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. So I was the same. So my 20s were like full of fun.
Yeah.
Lots of fun.
Big adventure.
I mean, medical school, but otherwise lots of fun.
So doesn't sound fun.
True. And then your 30s, you're like on task. Like, let's get this show going. Yeah. Let's find the partner, the life partner.
Yeah.
Right? And how does that fit with a career? The stakes are higher.
The stakes are higher. Yeah. Well, I mean, just the experience of, oh, wow, now I'm responsible for the well-being of this and the survival. So first the survival, then secondarily the well-being of this tiny human. And I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I thought just because I wanted to have kids, I thought I would naturally feel like I knew what I was doing. That was not my experience at all. It was just like, which does transition me to our conversation that I want to have a little bit about hormones, even though that's a bit of a left turn. But I want to hear about, when do you think during our reproductive years is a good time to start tracking our hormone panels so that we can see changes? And then at what point might adding in some HRT be useful and helpful? So of course, obviously it's super individual. But.
Well, I think you can say generally that you want to do a baseline. Yeah. You want a really good baseline, especially when you're feeling fantastic. So whether that's in your 20s or your 30s, get an impeccable baseline. Like, look at thyroid, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. Look at cortisol.
Yeah.
Look at how you're handling stress and how it's moving through your body. Maybe look at anti-Mullerian hormone, which is one of those hormones that tends to go down as you start to run out of ripe eggs. So get a really good baseline. And I would say the sooner the better. One baseline is good. A couple are even better. It's good to have 2 points on the line to get a sense of where you were. But this is critical later as you start to move toward hormone therapy or you start to use herbal treatments like chaste tree as a way of modulating your progesterone levels. So having a baseline, I would say anytime in those reproductive years is really important.
Great.
And then with hormone therapy, I was just talking to my publisher and my agent, and they were both saying that as women in their mid-40s, that when they list some of the symptoms that they're experiencing, which to me are clearly perimenopausal, there's 100 plus symptoms and they have them, their doctors are like, oh no, you're too young to have perimenopause. You're too young. And I'm just like, what? Why is this still happening? Yeah. So there's an overlap between your reproductive years and your perimenopausal years.
Quite a bit.
So we want to be thinking about that. through the process.
Yeah. So one of the things that I have heard that I think has been a shift over the last decade in the research is that actually beginning some bioidentical hormones earlier can actually enhance our longevity, enhance our long-term, even fertility perhaps, and certainly just like make us feel better. Whereas before I felt like word on the street was a little bit more wait as long as possible so that you don't talk your ovaries out of doing their job and don't make them essentially like go to sleep too early. What do you think about those things?
I think the evolution is correct in our thinking about this. So I would say I would be a little more circumspect about the way it used to be, which was wait until you're having hot flashes and night sweats.
Yeah.
And then we'll give you probably synthetic hormones, maybe bioidentical if you really complain about it. And that was the main thing that was treated.
Mm-hmm.
So,
just hot flashes and night sweats.
Hot flashes and night sweats. So that was considered the most evidence-based indication for starting hormone therapy. So what we realize now, as we know more about the biochemistry of this transition that women go through, we know more about the role of the mitochondria, which are, we think of them as the power brokers inside of your cells. They generate ATP, they generate energy, they convert the food that you eat into the energy that you feel during the day. We think that in the female body, we know that your eggs, your oocytes have the highest concentration of mitochondria. And so the place that you start to feel it first is in your mitochondria. So mitochondria in your eggs, as they start to become more impaired, as you get older, or you get exposed to toxins, or you've got too much cortisol, we think that estrogen is a really critical factor for keeping your mitochondria young.
Okay.
So that's part of the bridge for why we want to intervene sooner. The other thing that I want to think about is with these 100+ symptoms that women have as they go through perimenopause and menopause, one of the key ones is sleep and sleep disruption. And women may not perceive that they have hot flashes and night sweats, and yet their sleep becomes disrupted. If we're not treating that early, it can become a pattern that is very hard to correct.
Right. And then that's almost because as your sleep gets disrupted and you're long-term sleep deprived, then that's going to create all these other symptoms.
It accelerates the aging process. It makes you more likely to be depressed.
Yeah.
Makes you less interested in exercise.
It's terrible.
Makes you crave carbohydrates. Your insulin goes up. You start to store more fat. On and on.
Yeah.
So yes, we want to address it as early as possible. Okay. So I might have a woman who's 35. She's got progesterone that's starting to decline. I'm going to use some progesterone in that case. Okay. Or offer it. Yeah. We'll have a collaborative discussion about it to see if that improves sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. And then what are some things, because regardless of whether somebody wants to actually get pregnant or not, there's such a huge connection between just vitality and life force and energy levels and our fertility. So I think my humble opinion is that women should be actually doing all the things that fit into their lifestyle to support their fertility more on a metaphorical level. And obviously, because from a scientific perspective, it is creating that strong foundation for longevity and vibrancy. And so, given that, what can we be doing to support our egg quality, whether we are wanting to get pregnant or not, certainly in our reproductive years, but then also as we're making that transition more into perimenopause, past 40?
That is exactly the right question. Like, how do we support our egg quality, the aging process of the ovaries?
Yeah.
And so
I like that. How do we support the aging process of the ovaries? That feels really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're
it's
right.
Like not anti anything. It's like supporting the process.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think what's important to know about is the things that are working against you. So that includes being a stress case, having too much cortisol, having too much sympathetic nervous system activity relative to parasympathetic. It includes overeating certain macronutrients like carbohydrates. It includes under-consuming micronutrients that you need for all of these processes in the body, things like magnesium, vitamin D, glutathione. It includes, this is going to get more into your realm, it includes understanding self-efficacy and getting a sense of, okay, these things are not happening to me. They're happening with me and for me and through me. How can I partner with spirit in a way that, I feel like I'm invoking your mother here. How can I partner with spirit in a way that allows me to move forward with clarity and with the youngest eggs possible?
I love that. It's so beautiful. Yeah, because our eggs are metaphors for our creative life force. You know,
Yes.
they are the living embodiment of that.
That's right.
And so, and you know, like conception is a freaking miracle, right? And so to have all those living potentialities inside of us that, you know, have existed since 4 months gestation inside our mothers, inside our grandmothers' bodies is such an honor. It's such a miracle. So I love that you're bringing in that psycho-spiritual aspect, that partnering with the divine to say, like, what am I here to create? You know, living or otherwise.
That's right. And I would even, let's add another layer.
Great.
I feel like some women, probably because of our disease care system and the way that we've set it up in the wrong way, a lot of women look at these symptoms that they experience or start to experience 35, 40, 45, irritability, the mood swings, the maybe dryness of the vulva or vagina, not having the energy that they once did. They do look at some of those things happening to them.
Right.
And I think if we shift the way we hold these symptoms and see them more as an initiation and a spiritual process where we're meant to wake up, I think that really changes the way we approach it.
Yeah. Right. They're an invitation from our bodies being like, hey, what about this?
Yeah.
Maybe lean in here. You know, last year I very bizarrely lost my hearing in my right ear. And there were a number of reasons for it, but it wouldn't come back regardless of what I did. It eventually did. And the hilarious part was I went to the audiologist and I sat in that booth and did the whole thing. And I came out and they were like, clinically speaking, your hearing is perfect. I was like, that's weird because I can't hear. Anyway, but I kept asking. I was like, all right, well, if my body is not having me hear out of one full side of my head, surely I'm being asked to, you know, listen inside. So I just kept saying to my body, hello, what do you want me to hear? What do you want me to hear? And it sucked, but it was also great, you know, because I got some really strong messages and invitations. And
What did your body want you to hear?
so the two things I kept hearing were like inside were bloom where you're planted and stop fucking around. And so for me, what that meant was I have this new book that I'm working on that I was really dragging my feet on and getting myself distracted by a million other projects and shiny objects, which is really my kryptonite in this lifetime. And so it was just that. And then the other thing that I was distracting myself with from the work that I was really supposed to be doing was thinking constantly about moving and obsessing over real estate listings.
Amazing. What a time sink that is.
Yeah. Wow. And my husband, you know, God love him. He was like, babe, you are not allowed to send me any further homes via text until you've written your book proposal. Once you've written your book proposal, I would love to talk to you about our next step and our next move for our family. But until that time, do not send me another home.
That's so loving. It's a loving boundary.
Noted. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Okay. So egg quality, vitality, hormones. I also want to know so at this stage of the game, like as you are this world's leading expert on expert on women's health. What are you excited about in terms of new frontiers for women's vitality and thriving?
Oh my gosh.
What should we look forward to?
Oh, so much. I feel like, here's what I notice. There's 4 million podcasts now.
Really?
4 million.
Wow.
And some of the guys that I enjoy listening to the most are Andrew Huberman and Peter Attia and even Joe Rogan occasionally. And there's a way that they are giving bro advice. It's what they know.
Oh, yeah,
They're talking. They're bros. They're talking about data that's mostly in men. They are not calling out when it's different in women. They're not saying, okay, all of this data that we have on deliberate cold exposure is in men, and we have very little data in women. So I feel like what I'm excited about personally is really understanding health span and longevity from a female perspective. So that I'm super excited about. I'm excited also, this sounds a little bit warped. When we think about the nadir, when we think about this U-bend, I want solutions. I want real solutions. And I want to work together with other women to come up with, how do we say to the woman who's overfunctioning, who's overworking, who's overextended and burnt out, and say, darling, here's what actually works. Here's what works in women. Here's what's been studied. You don't have to be part of some, uncontrolled medical experiment like we keep doing to women over and over again. Here's data that actually supports and points us in a direction to help you. So that's what I'm excited about. I'm also excited about launching a podcast, doing that again.
Congratulations.
I'm super excited to have you on it. And I feel like there's a way that you can either pontificate on a podcast and sort of have people eavesdropping in, which is kind of a masculine way to do it, or you can take your audience with you, which is what you do in your podcast. And that's a very different form of service.
It is a different form of service, and I'm so excited for you to be doing that. And I have a couple of questions. One is, are you going to be writing that book on health span and longevity for women?
Yes.
Okay, great. Can't wait to read it. I will be waiting with bated breath.
It's due in 2 months.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so you're writing it right now?
Yes.
Okay. And then we'll just have you back on the podcast.
Perfect.
If you'll let me come sit on your couch again.
Yes, please.
And we'll talk about that. And then my second question is for you. What was it that worked for you in your own life to stop overfunctioning in that nadir that you could say to a woman like, this is what actually works. This is what I did. This is how I made that shift.
It's such a good question. Number one, the whole body yes. So I learned this from a coach, Diana Chapman, and she learned it from Gay Hendricks and his wife, I think Susan Hendricks.
Katie
Hendricks.
I
you're
freaking
right.
love them.
Yeah. Katie Hendricks.
On the internet.
Right.
I haven't met them in person yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Well, she was mentored by them. And this idea of a whole body yes, I think this is foreign for a lot of women. Yeah. The idea is that you don't just give a cognitive yes, like, oh, yes, that sounds like a good idea. It sounds like it's good for my
with
career.
My goals
with
and
it
how
aligns
it
with
would
my
look
goals,
and
it'll
pleasing
look
the
good.
people.
Right. You check in with your entire body. And so I was taught to check in with my heart, to check in with my gut. But I would add, we also have to check in with the vulva.
100%. 100%. Or as Mama Gina would say, the pussy.
Yes.
Yeah. 100%. Because like, if that's where life comes from, how could that not be the best place to make decisions from?
For sure. And it's amazing what truths come from the vulva.
Yeah.
So that was a huge aha for me.
That's great.
And what I realized is that I've spent a lifetime, up until a couple of years ago, saying a partial yes, saying a lot of cognitive yeses, and then dragged the rest of my body along for the ride. And that has to stop. So the whole body yes. You and I are at different life stages. My kids they're both out of the house. They're launched. And that opens up a whole new portal. I mean, I think about BKS Iyengar, how he talks about, kind of being, as an adult, you're a student, and then you're a householder, and then you're a forest dweller, and then you're a sadhu, kind of a spiritual renunciate. And so I'm in the forest dweller phase. You're in the householder phase. And so really acknowledging that my role sort of day to day as a mother has shifted. Yeah. I'm much more of a guide.
Right.
And not quite a peer, but our relationship has changed. Not always the case. I still get emergency phone calls.
I'm sure.
But that forest dweller part, just really making sure that you don't kind of continue the householder way of working. And you get very deliberate about how you want your forest dweller years to be. Yeah. And for me, part of that was going through a divorce, which was really painful and messy and difficult. But I stepped into authenticity in a way that I hadn't before. And I was taught as a kid that you stay connected, you don't get divorced, you hang in there, especially if you have children, you've got a responsibility to your children. And I sacrificed authenticity for connection and what I perceived to be attachment. And that doesn't work. That doesn't work. Really, you need both. You need secure attachment and authenticity. So that was a huge shift. And then I think all of this relates to boundaries. So those are the things that really made a difference for me.
So good. I'm curious. I was at a conference recently, and a bunch of people talked about the nervous system, which I was really excited about. Except nearly pretty much 100% of those conversations were still essentially, they were talking about mindset work. And I was like, interesting how we're talking about the nervous system and yet keeping things on the level of the cognitive and the mind. And I was like, what about the body? And so I'm so glad you talked about the full body yes as being the compass, because that is not a head down approach. That is not like, let me check in with my mind. Let me be, it's like there's so much information available to us if we go beyond the verbal, if we go beyond what we can even articulate as a thought, that just deeper knowing. And so I'm curious, when people refer to the body as a meat suit, how do you feel as a women's health doctor? And what do you think about when you hear that?
Oh my gosh. Well, it makes me think of Lady Gaga, right?
Like
she rocked the meat suit.
I forgot about that.
I must say.
Yeah,
she rebranded the meat suit.
That was so weird and fabulous.
It was so weird. Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate this question, Kate. And I know you've been doing some certifications related to nervous system regulation and trauma. And I so appreciate hearing about that on your podcast. And I feel like that's part of what we're talking about here in terms of reclaiming authenticity and reclaiming a path that is less about what your mind thinks needs to happen versus getting your whole body on board.
Yeah.
And nervous system regulation is something that I knew about going through my medical training. And when I was in medical school, I used to go to Kripalu as often as possible just to practice yoga. I became a yoga teacher. I teach meditation. Love your meditation that you have on your podcast.
Thank you.
Beautiful. And I feel like nervous system regulation is so critical. And a lot of women, men too, understand cognitively what that is, but they don't feel it.
Right.
They don't feel regulated and they don't know. And I feel like a lot of it is, I had this experience when I started doing psychedelic assisted therapy of realizing how dissociated I was. So that I spent most of my time upstairs and with a cognitive approach and kind of dealing with my meat suit. And it wasn't until I started to heal that and started to learn how to do nervous system regulation that it allowed me to just open up all these terrains of body wisdom, of spiritual wisdom. So I feel like that is a really critical part.
Yeah.
And this functional dissociation that so many of us have, you want to ask yourself if you have that. I mean, I know you don't, but
I mean,
for our
sometimes I do.
listeners-
Right? Like,
Well, it's an old pattern.
it's an old pattern. And when you come through the world in families that really are focused on academic achievement, and then, you know, you're in New England in school, and it's like all about being celebrated for being smart,
Right.
you know, and figuring it out everything with your mind. And it, you know, when I got pregnant with Penelope, my first, and then gave birth to her in that first year of her life, none of my old tricks worked. I couldn't get through that challenge by being smarter, being stronger, trying harder, doing more. Like, none of those things worked. And so it really was that invitation to say, well, I need a different skill set here. Like, one that has not been shown to me.
Yes.
It has not been modeled, is really not many places in our culture, at least, you know, where I was living and in the part of the world that I was in. So I appreciate calling attention to that dissociation and really feeling the degree to which we over celebrate the mind.
We do. And you're right. I mean, that sort of mindset training and using that as a path forward never worked for me.
Interesting.
And I couldn't think my way out of the problems that I had, especially with overfunctioning.
Yeah.
It had to be this bottom up, like I had to feel it inside, not up here, but downstairs, like in my body,
Yeah.
to really be able to make change.
And so you mentioned, you mentioned yoga, you mentioned psychedelic assisted therapy. What are some of the other like downstairs practices that have been really useful for you in, I don't know, maybe you wouldn't say it this way, but like the reclamation of your embodied wisdom?
Oh, I would say it that way. I mean, definitely sex.
Yeah.
Orgasm.
Yeah.
Female pleasure. Our bodies are made for pleasure. And if you're spending most of your time, including sexually, upstairs, it just doesn't work. So I think that's a huge part. I've always been someone who loves the outdoors. I spent a lot of years in Alaska. I went to high school up there, and my parents lived there for 20 years. So wilderness, like, it's a place that I connect to spirit and to divinity very easily. So spending time outside is really important. Spiritual practice, relationship. It's so critical. And I love how you talked about mothering Penelope and how your intellect didn't help you. And I feel like that's really true. That was one of the first places that I hit the wall. I felt like, yeah, there's like a raw mammal quality to mothering that's so important. And that never goes away. Like you don't move past that. Like there's still, it's such a touch point, and it's so critical for them. And then it also, you know, there's an unselfish quality to this. I'll just say it. There's a way that my children hold me to a standard that is so much higher than the standard I hold myself to. So what I expect, what I want for them, like in terms of their relationships and the satisfaction that I want them to have in their careers, what they expect from their friendships, how they expect to be treated, how they develop secure attachment, I have to be modeling those things.
Right.
Even now, even though they're out of the house.
Oh, yeah.
So I really appreciate what you're saying about mothering.
Yeah, that is so true and it's not even like, in my experience, it's not even like they're holding me to a higher standard in terms of any kind of like hierarchical structure that we would have externally. It's that higher standard of wholeness and full living.
Yes.
You know?
Authenticity.
Yeah, authenticity.
Wholeness is exactly right.
Yeah, wholeness. Okay, so as we wrap up here, this show is really about abundance. And I talk a lot about people's relationships with money. You discussed HRV and our overfunctioning and, the nadir, that dip of over, the whatever was the study?
U-bend.
The U-bend, thank
Yes.
you. Overworking. And so much of that is tied up for women in our relationship with money. And so it's kind of a big question, but answer however you'd like. What do you see are the impacts that our relationship with money has on women's bodies and our health and vibrancy?
Oh, it's such a good question, Kate. So let me feel into it with a little bit at a time. I feel like I used to have the wrong idea about money. I felt like, especially going into medicine, I felt like I need to have a stable career and stable income, and I need to sock the money away in the 401k, and I need to have a house and pay off my mortgage and have equity. I thought all of those things would provide security and safety. And it turns out they don't. It turns out that safety and security is an inside job. And I know that's easy to say, but we are now finally at a stage scientifically where we can say, here's how you create safety in the body, and here's how you measure it. And we've talked about some of the measures like heart rate variability and cortisol and even, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. We can define safety in the body. And I think the experience over my lifetime of realizing how unsafe I felt as a kid and how foreign the idea of safety was until I really started to learn about nervous system regulation, that has been a gigantic game changer. And then it maps to money, because I used to think, I just need to charge as much as possible and, sock away this money and be able to pay for my kids to go to college and maybe help them buy a house. And now I realize, no, the security and the safety, I could have that driving around in a van.
Yeah.
And it has the same physiological effect. So I've really changed the way that I think about money as an exchange of energy. But you're asking a bigger question, which is, what do I see in women? I see a lot of women who compromise their authenticity to provide what they perceive to be safety and security. And I think that's a huge question. They sacrifice their wholeness. They sacrifice their gifts because they think they need to stay in a marriage that maybe is dead, isn't working. They feel like they need to stay for the kids. Mm-hmm. So I see a lot of that. And then I also see various patterns of women who maybe because they grew up with a feeling of lack, chase money in a way that leads to, kind of a basic level of overwhelm and overwork and overfunctioning. But also there's another pattern of women who are not appreciated and still hang in there in a relationship that's not working. And it's more of a neglect situation. And then there's a more advanced version, which I probably had, which was this chronic state of overworking.
Yeah.
And waiting until your body objects with the low heart rate variability, the repeated infections, the cortisol that never seems to get better. So those are some of the patterns that I see in the women that I work with.
Thank you so much for saying that. I mean, for you listening, I did not ask Sara to say those things about money and safety in the nervous system, but that is the core of what I'm here to share at this particular time. That
we need you.
Without,
we need you, Kate.
Yeah, without the embodied feeling, no amount of money is ever going to make you feel safe if you can't feel safe already. And then once you do, great, add more money. Wonderful. Or not.
And
right?
the cool thing is once you feel safe, there's no going back. There's no way you can tolerate that lack of safety again.
That's very cool. Yeah, that compounding impact of nervous system regulation.
Yes.
This has been just an absolute pleasure. I think you're the best. Thank you. Thank you for this conversation. I know you have so many beautiful books. You have a new podcast out. So can you tell folks where to find you, where to connect if they want to dive in deeper?
Well, I'm going through a name change, so I'll mention that
Great.
first. I used to be known as Sara Gottfried, and I'm going back to my maiden name, which is Sara Szal, S as in Sam, Z as in Zebra, A-L. So my website, Sara Szal, MD. Great. We just rebranded, and the podcast is there. It's called Treated with Dr. Sara. Those are the main ways.
Beautiful.
I hang out on Instagram. That's a good place to interact.
Great. Okay, amazing. So find Dr. Sara Szal, all the places. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Kate.
This episode is brought to you by Glow-C, which is skincare you can drink. I have been using and loving Glow-C for the past couple of months, and it combines a beautiful blend of clinically tested probiotics that actually survive in your digestive tract and hyaluronic acid, prickly pear, vitamin C, and so many other beautiful ingredients to help you glow and hydrate from the inside out. It is also delicious and convenient and refreshing. You can go to katenorthrup.com/Glow-C, GLOCI, and use the discount code Kate Northrup, all one word, to get 25% off your first order. Again, that's katenorthrup.com/Glow-C, and use Kate Northrup at checkout for 25% off. Enjoy.